Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome in to Take Command with Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Logan spent a decade in the NFL. You can listen to me on 106.7 The Fan. The show, by the way, comes your way via video if you want to watch us on YouTube, 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTube channels. And, of course, you can subscribe, rate, review, podcasty stuff, all available. Do it via the podcast. The audio is available wherever you get your pods. Logan, what's up? How are you?
I'm good, man. You doing all right? I mean, we're in like the thick of football offseason here, kind of. So it's kind of fun to be talking about it. Yeah,
I love it. It's fun. I'm a big coaching search guy. I enjoy tracking all that. Obviously, the playoffs are a blast. As far as the hair goes today, I'm kind of trying to the hair is not in a great place. I wanted to do a hat, and then my hat wasn't down here. So I gelled it and then went to bed and then didn't get to take the shower yet. So just we're in a weird place with the hair on the video. But otherwise, I think things are okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even notice. I thought you looked like a dapper young gentleman over there, and you're calling attention to it in a negative way.
Well, that's because my beard looks silly. I took a 1.5 guard to the beard and reshaped it just about a day ago. So that's where you're really impressed by me right now.
Yeah. That's got to be it. That's got to be
nothing like a well-manicured beard. I've always said all it takes is me cleaning up the beard, and I look like Jake Gyllenhaal on Oscars night. You know what I'm saying?
No doubt. I mean, no doubt.
Who's got a better beard than Gyllenhaal with a 2-guard? That's a good-looking beard. Don't you agree?
It's a great beard. Yeah, I mean, he's a good-looking guy, though, just in general. So he could probably do whatever he wants and come out of that thing looking all right.
He's got that going for him. All right, here's the lay of the land today. I want to get into the Shrine Bowl because you broke down a bunch of the prospects that are taking part in the game, so we'll do that mid-segment. We can look ahead to the conference championship games before we're out of here, but we got to start with the big Commanders news, which is that Al Harris is now interviewing for this defensive coordinator job. This is really interesting because over the first couple of weeks of the DC search, there wasn't seeming interest in Al Harris interviewing. The only rhetoric we really heard from the building over and over and over again, it seemed like via the reporters, John Keim and different people was, and certainly what I've heard myself, they wanted an experienced play caller on defense. They want someone who's been a DC for a while. They want someone who's called plays because Dan Quinn doesn't want to have to help or do a lot of that like he did at the end of last year. Well, it's interesting because now this is the second guy that they'll interview that doesn't have any experience as a coordinator or a play caller. And if you went the Al Harris route, and I can sing his praises on why it might make sense in a moment, he's been in Chicago where they're the number one team in takeaways and interceptions this year. And everywhere he goes, interceptions and takeaways follow. Then there's a lot of Dan Quinn coaching up the defense and helping out on that side of the ball and maybe even calling some plays. So what do you make of this development?
Yeah, I think it just kind of speaks to the change in the potential higher landscape, right? I think you look at Ulbrich, he's being retained in Atlanta. I think you look at Flores, I'm pretty sure he's going back to Minnesota. Obviously, those guys were people that we both were really excited about. And as you start checking names off the list, it's kind of like, well, we need to make sure that we have other options. And I think Will Harris is a bright young coach who's been successful coaching defensive backs. I think the turnovers speak for themselves. And getting a name like that, even maybe if he's not 100% ready in the building, might not be a bad idea. And I think, Dan Quinn talks about coaching development quite a bit, and this might be a perfect candidate for that. Hey, you're really good as a position coach. You really understand the intricacies of the back end of the defense. Let's see if we can get you locked in here a little bit more with a larger role. And I think, Dan may not want to be that involved in the defense, but I think as this search goes on and candidates are not taking the job, I think you got to kind of look at other spots, and Will Harris seems like a perfectly reasonable candidate.
Yeah. Here's something I'll say about Al Harris, though, at this point, and that is I think that you should be talking to him regardless. Like I would have talked to him right at the beginning of this process with the first batch of interviews for the reason you just said, to be honest with you. Because you want to talk to the people that do things at high levels and you want to talk to the really sharp young minds, right? And if you're looking at takeaways this year, the Bears had 33, number one in the NFL. If you're looking at interceptions this year, the Bears had 23. He was coaching their secondary. That's number one in the NFL. Wherever he has gone, takeaways, interceptions, those things have followed, and it's been an issue. and especially this past year. So I would have brought him in just to pick his brain. I don't know if it's fair to say Al Harris is, the whisperer. He's the reason they get all the picks. But I know in Dallas they had a bunch of dudes with him and Dan Quinn that led the league in interceptions, and they were really good at it. And now in Chicago, they have dudes that lead the league in interceptions. And so I would want to just see, hey, what's what. But it's also interesting to me, and this is something I need you to comment on. So they didn't jump to interview him and make him a priority in the search, pretty obviously. Dan Quinn knows him so well. I mean, he was in Dallas with him. That was like a little bit of an alarm bell for me initially. And then the other one I'll point out is he was in Dallas for years. The Cowboys have a DC opening. They haven't interviewed him. They're not interviewing him, to my knowledge. He's interviewed with the Packers and to Washington. That's one of those things I always pay attention to. Like David Blau was in this building and they loved him so much and thought so highly of him that they basically moved on from Cliff, did a cursory search with 2 guys outside the building that have never called plays, and then promoted David Blau before they ever talked to Mike McDaniel, really. That's how much they liked the guy in their building that's ascending. This dude was with the Cowboys. They blow out Eberflus, and they're still not interviewing him. That worries me a little bit.
No, I think it's definitely a valid concern. I think, and again, with these coaching hires, I've always been a believer when you're looking for a defensive coach, you want somebody who kind of operates predominantly at the middle level of the defense. So think linebacker level of the defense, because a big part of defense is run fits. We talked about this earlier, when we were kind of getting the ball rolling on the coaching search. And so one thing about run fits, I think sometimes the secondary coaches aren't as locked in. And I think that's something that he would have to learn. Al Harris would have to learn. He'd have to kind of come along with. And I think maybe that's where Dan's mentorship comes in. But also I do think there are guys that are just better position coaches, right? They just have a knack for coaching and connecting with guys at that level. And there's something funny, I think, or interesting about coaching searches is you're kind of promoted to the level that you're least competent to sometimes, right? It's like, hey, I'm really, really good at this position coach thing. And then the second I get to the coordinator spot, I'm not quite as good. And so I do think that there's always that kind of balance you're walking here when you're looking for these guys of saying where is this person? Where are they maximizing? And I think Al Harris, I don't know him. I just know by reputation, but a lot of people think he does an excellent job with the defensive backs. And so if they think he's really good at that, they don't think he's quite ready for the DC thing. I understand kind of the pause here in terms of interviewing him. I do think, though, he's a smart dude. He's had success in the NFL. Why not give him a look? Like you said, talk to him about kind of his philosophy. Talk to him about the interceptions. Talk to him. Maybe his perspective has expanded over the last year and a half. So, again, there are a bunch of reasons why this might not be the right thing, or why he wasn't being interviewed in that first wave. But I think as guys are kind of checked off the list, it's you need to find other people. And obviously they feel good enough about him now, or to a certain extent, to kind of give him this opportunity to interview. And just because he's interviewing doesn't mean he's going to get the job. But I do think there are reasons maybe as to why he wasn't in that first wave of interviews. Yeah.
And it's funny because when the offseason started, if you asked me who's someone they should talk to, I would have maybe listed him first, because I'm always a proponent of young up and coming players. It's just, or coaches, right? It's just one of those things where you start asking around, and the point on the Cowboys was brought up to me, and I think it's a really good one. It's if David Blau was available and Washington wasn't talking to him, for a quarterback's coach's role, what he'd done or elevating him, it would be okay, they saw him, they know him better than anybody. So that is interesting to me. Now, that said, if they hire him, I'll be excited about it. But I think people have to acknowledge and understand this would be a very different hire. They talked for a couple of weeks. Experienced DC play caller. Dan Quinn doesn't want to have to worry about that side of the ball because you've already got this inexperienced offensive coordinator in David Blau, and I've got to potentially, help a little bit on that side of the building or whatever. You'll now have 2 of those guys potentially, where it's I've never been a coordinator. I've never called plays. I think that means Dan is way more involved in the defense, see the end of the season with Joe Witt. And because you hired Blau and you've got this really young offensive staff, I'm just not sure if from a 10,000 foot view, that's the best plan. And I have a bias just based on clearly their idea. I'm basing it on what they were thinking. They were saying, yeah, we'll do the Blau thing because we love him and he's young and we want to be a year early on this because he's a superstar. But it means we've got to go with Flores or Gannon or Graham or whoever on defense, so we don't have to worry about both sides of the ball. And now they're kind of pivoting. So it's just curious to me. I think you're right, though. When you want Ulbrich and you never get to interview him, and you really want Flores, and he ends up staying in Minnesota. And you really want Raheem, but you haven't been able to talk to him because he's busy doing head coaching interviews. And it's like a scene out of like trying to find a babysitter in a movie. You've seen like 50.
Right, yeah.
You're like going down and you're like, okay, nope. So like some of this is that the search is not going ideally, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the idea of it being a very different hire is okay. I think as long as you can put scaffoldings and systems in place to support those guys. And I think it probably changes how you operate in terms of the offensive side of the football too. Like maybe you get a guy who's got much more experience as a pass game coordinator for the offense, or you kind of adjust your perspective in terms of run game coordinator, or you have a third-party consultant kind of coming in for the offense, so Dan doesn't need to supervise that side of the football as much. And then so now on the defense side of the football, the same thing can happen. Dan can kind of provide some oversight, but you can also go out and hire some experienced people kind of in these tangential supplementary roles. So again, like even though it's not going maybe the way that they envisioned it going, again, like you and I both were like, Ulbrich 100%, let's go. He doesn't leave Atlanta. That's tough. But now we've got to change our parameters. The pieces on the board are different, and we have to kind of make different assessments and decisions based on what we have available. And so I do think you can make this work. And I do think you can make it work where Dan's even less involved. But I think you have to make sure that the staff is there to support him. And I think that's something that, again, if they do go this direction with Al Harris, not saying that they will, because there's still other pieces. Gannon, I think, is a really interesting kind of piece still on the board here. But if you do go with Al Harris, like I think you have to think about how do you support him. And again, like how you support Blau. Like both those things now become priorities. And I think the supplementary hires now become bigger storylines the farther we get into the offseason. Because again, if you hire Gannon, like that dude's going to know exactly what to do, right? But again, like maybe he may or may not come. If you hire Al Harris now, it's like, hey, who's the run game coordinator? Who's the pass game coordinator? How do we make sure that he has resources on that side of the football to let him be the best version of himself in year one? And again, I think you can do it. It just, you got to kind of think about it in a little bit different way.
And to their credit, there are 9 other openings for head coaches right now that some of these DC candidates that they like are interviewing for. I mean, Gannon has done interviews for head coaching jobs. And there's also then we mentioned Dallas, Washington. I think there was a dozen at one point. DC openings, right? Now, at least in Ulbrich's case and Flores' case with re-signing, some of those have sealed up. But my point is just, like, there's a lot of moving parts. It's not easy to get your guy here because the timing isn't right yet. It's like a game of musical chairs, but the music hasn't really turned off. So I'm not suggesting they should have already landed someone. But if you just start crossing some of the names off the list, if you're unsure about being able to get Gannon because of all the other interviews he's doing, and then you go down the board, it looks like kind of that first tier of like, the best teams in the tournament are kind of gone. So now we're going best of the rest. So if they want to go the experienced play caller route, you would still have Patrick Graham on the board, who was the DC with the Raiders, and you would still have Joe Cullen available. He has not been calling plays recently under Spags with the Chiefs, the D-line coach, but he did call plays as the defensive coordinator previously in his stop with Jacksonville. So those guys are still there if they want to go that route. And then you would have Al Harris, who they're interviewing from the Bears, pass game coordinator, and Denard Wilson, who's the DB's coach in Seattle from Mike McDonald, who also didn't call plays. So it's kind of a couple guys now that would be first-timers, a couple guys who have called plays but were maybe like second-tier candidates to begin with in people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do think it just comes down to this is a people business and who you feel most comfortable with, quite honestly. Like, I know people always kind of talk about like the nepotism of the NFL coaching cycle, but you guys, they spend so much time together and like those relationships are so important. So to me, that's something that I want to keep an eye on is like who impresses the most and who has the best relationship with Dan. Because if Dan is going to be overseeing this quite a bit, you want to make sure that they have a good relationship and they can work together and that they can take feedback. I mean, that might be something that's maybe the most important is like in the interview, during that process, if it's like, man, this guy's pretty rigid in terms of his perspective, like how is Dan going to be able to oversee and help if you're not willing to take that kind of feedback? So I think that's something that to keep an eye on. It's kind of transitioned from who is the guy, like our parameters in terms of analysis have changed too, because it's like, this person is the most qualified because they've called plays before. And now I think it kind of shifts from that into interpersonal stuff. I think that kind of becomes a bigger issue as we get deeper into the cycle with some of these guys who are a little bit less experienced.
Let's take command with Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. Logan's been keeping a close eye on the Shrine Bowl, so I want to get into some of the top prospects participating in that event. We'll do that next as we continue. Welcome back to Take Command. We told you we'd be covering the NFL draft from all angles on the show. Logan, you're actually on the road here. You're going to be flying out to Frisco. The Star is where all of the Shrine Bowl players are going to be practicing for a few days, and then they're going to be playing in a showcase. This is, for a long time, the Shrine Bowl, which has been around for over 100 years, was the biggest kind of bowl game, postseason showcase for draft prospects. The Senior Bowl, which is coming up next, which you'll also be at, has become that game, I would say. But the Shrine Bowl is still important and one of the biggest on the calendar, and you're going to get a look at some really interesting draft prospects, some top 50 guys, but mostly, day 2, day 3 guys that have a chance to impact teams. See Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, he's the MVP of the game last year. And again, with the pick in the 5th round, 2 picks in the 6th round, the pick in the 7th round, like these guys are the guys that are going to be in that range. And so like when you're watching the film of these guys, it is interesting because like you're watching the guys at the Senior Bowl, you're like, oh man, this guy's a stud. This guy could fill this role right now. But those guys tend to be top kind of 150, 125 type players. And the guys at the Shrine Bowl, for whatever reason, have warts. It's like, here's this defensive end from Texas who's big, he's long, he's got great hand usage, but is he the best athlete in the world? Is he actually more of an interior player? And those are the kind of questions you're asking yourself as you're watching some of these guys. And so I do think it's a different process. It's fun. It really is. It really comes back down to like, hey, what role do I see from him? Which makes it honestly quite hard to evaluate for the Commanders at the moment because I don't know what defense they're going to be in. Like you're like, oh, this guy would be perfect for what Joe Witt was doing last year, but obviously the paradigm has shifted here. So
I was going to ask you that. I mean, normally when you go to these events, you've got your staff in place for the most part.
Yeah.
So like if, luckily with David Blau, they're able to sit down and have a meeting and be like, all right, how are you doing this? Now he's still building his offense, but what kind of player are we looking for you? How can we help you? They don't have a coordinator. I mean, they don't know what they're running, how they're running it. That's got to make things harder on the scouting staff.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really challenging. Honestly, like I would assume, like everybody, they're going to do their big board and kind of go 100 to 300, however they do it, and make their horizontal boards and all that stuff. But I've had conversations with scouts at the combine, and this is the other thing that's important to note here too, in terms of how the NFL operates. So right now it's all scouts. So for the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, it'll be predominantly scouts. Obviously, Adam Peters will be involved in that. The coaches don't usually get involved until the combine. And so it's really interesting. Like I'll bump into coaching buddies and I'll be like, hey man, what do you think of player so-and-so? He's like, oh, I haven't really started watching them yet. I'll start next week. And so that's kind of like when you'll hear like the national narrative about the draft shift pretty dramatically. Like right now it's all opinion based on, JAG evaluator like myself. After the combine, that's when the coaches get involved. That's when like everyone kind of starts pulling on their connections. Mel Kiper starts pulling his connections, all these different things. And then you'll get a more accurate representation of what the teams actually think of these players. So even though the staff isn't in place now, I think it makes it a little bit more challenging. The scouts are doing their job. They're going to make their boards, they're going to have their evaluations. Once the coaches are involved and they give their feedback, they can adjust the boards accordingly. So while a big deal, I don't think it's the end of the world, for example.
Totally. I don't like the scouting part I get, but you talk to scouts, like the harmony between scout and staff. And like, I'm finding a coach, the player he wants for what we run. That's how they view it. That's kind of the gig. Now you're ranking players' talents, obviously, but if you don't know what you're running because you don't have a coach yet, it does just complicate matters. But we're still in our infancy. It's January 22nd. It's an early part of the offseason. They're going to figure all this out. But yes, this is a pretty cool benchmark here. So the Senior Bowl is even bigger. We'll talk about that a ton on the pod, and I know you'll have a lot of reports there as well. But I think the Shrine Bowl's come a long way in a few years. They're doing a good job. This guy, Eric Galco, that runs it. They have a pro day that's pretty cool. They have this analytics and data kind of day that they do with players that I think is awesome for some of the organizations that are more analytically driven. And you've seen a record number of picks come from this event the last couple of years. Brock Purdy is kind of the poster child, right? But
Tom Brady, shoot. Tom Brady was there too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking more like just recently. But yeah, I mean, Tyquan Thornton played in this game, and now is a pretty significant free agent who had a good year in Kansas City. So there are some names that have popped. Bill is the most recent one here that people would know. I heard Galco talking on a show where he said there's going to be 27 GMs at the event. And he said there's several head coaches coming as well, and some of that might be proximity. But that's pretty cool that they've kind of gotten this thing to that level. So without further ado, I want to get into some of these players. So I'll let you steer first. There's some guys I jotted down that I want to ask you about as well. But where do you want to begin?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can start with those guys you jotted down. I haven't watched all of them, but most of them. And so we can kind of start with those guys. I think it's just, like I said, it's an interesting event because, like, again, you go to the Senior Bowl, man, and we got Ruben Bain, we got, Bailey from Texas Tech. Those guys are going to be top 10 picks. And here it's like, it's just a little different in terms of what you're looking at. Like, you cut on film a Bain, cut on film a Bailey, and you're like, oh, man, like, these guys are amazing. Maybe they don't fit perfectly with the exact scheme that you want. But, like, here with these other players, it's much more layered, in terms of, like, role, development arc, all those different things.
All right, so I actually want to start with tight ends, right in your wheelhouse. And the reason I say that is because I don't think they're going to take a tight end early in this draft. They have the 7th pick. They don't have a second-round pick. I don't think there's a tight end that makes sense at 7. You'd have to trade back, and it's just a little bit more of a vanity selection probably for them, although for me it's a major priority. But I do think this is a super deep tight end class, and you're going to be able to get value in the mid-rounds, and maybe that's how this works out. And it just so happens at the Shrine Bowl, there's some really interesting names. Dallin Bentley from Utah, Eli Raridan from Notre Dame, Jared Kanik from Oklahoma, Riley Nowakowski, who we just saw win a national championship with Indiana, and Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt are all taking part in this Shrine game, I believe. So I ask you, which of these guys have impressed you or stood out when you watch the tape, and who do you want to talk about?
I mean, shoot, like, all these guys are kind of interesting. So let's start with Eli Stowers. I know initially he had said that he was going to do this, but now it looks like he's going to be a top 50 pick. So he's not doing either the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl. But he's the guy that is like kind of this, he was at New Mexico State. He converted to tight end after a shoulder injury. He used to be a quarterback. And then kind of when the quarterback, I forget his name, went from New Mexico to Vanderbilt, he kind of went and transferred there and has become – I think he's definitely in the conversation for being the first Pavia. Thank you, Evan Pavia, for being the first tight end selected. I know people want to talk about Kenyon Sadiq quite a bit. To me, they're kind of in the same boat. I think Kenyon Sadiq has got some good physicality to him, runs routes like a receiver. Eli Stowers has a little bit of that to him as well. And so there's certain games where you cut on and you see plays that, like, he's just a freak, man. Like, he's catching the football, he's breaking tackles, he's outrunning people for touchdowns. And I think because he's at Vanderbilt, people don't talk about him the same way. I think the guy that's paid maybe the biggest name at the Shrine Bowl is Jack Endries, the tight end from Texas. He transferred from Cal. He's a funny guy to talk about because I think his film is excellent. Like, he blocks well in line. I think he's got some nice route running nuance. I think he can kind of sink his hips, get in and out of cuts. I think he tracks the ball well in the air. He's 6'4", almost 6'5", I would say, but he's like 238 pounds. So he's a little bit lean in terms of his body type. But if you're just going off the film, I think you're going to have a hard time finding a guy who does both better than him in this class. So to me, the big question is, like, what's the body weight looking like after kind of coming out of the season? How are we in terms of our physicality and our build? But in terms of the tape, man, there's not a lot of questions about him moving forward in the process.
Eli Stowers, by the way, who is at A&M, New Mexico State, as you mentioned, in Vanderbilt, is 6'4", 215. For people who haven't seen him play, he caught 62 balls for 770 yards this past year. So it's back-to-back 50-catch seasons in college, ultra productive. Jack Endries, though, interestingly, the last tight end that you mentioned there, California and Texas, this past year, the production dropped off from California in the ACC, which is still funny to say, to Texas in the SEC, went from 56 catches to 33, about 630 yards to 350. Was he just used way differently? Like, that is weird to me.
I think that a lot of that has to do with Archie Manning down there in Texas. Like, when you watch the games, like, their games, like, I'm trying to think, we were watching the A&M game, or I was watching it yesterday, and you're just like, man, this is like pulling teeth here a little bit from a pass protection standpoint. And it's not all on Archie. Like Archie does some actually really good stuff, makes some tremendous throws. Like you can see that why people were talking about him as a first round player this year. But I think there's just there was a lot of kind of feeling it out. I think that's one of the things you see with NIL college football at the moment is you get teams like Indiana, which are building something based on principles. Other schools are just signing best player available. And like when you're signing best player available, I think that really makes it hard to kind of cultivate a consistent offensive perspective. I think you see that specifically in the offensive line. So I think a lot of it was like, especially early in the year, they looked like they were struggle busting quite a bit. And again, like that's going to, like, you know, tight end's a dependent position. It's dependent on protection. It's dependent on the quarterback. I think that's one of the reasons why you see him drop off a little bit in terms of his production.
So one of the you said this, and one of the things I've heard a lot about injuries and different scouting reports and things is that he can do both block and be a receiver, which is a huge asset.
Yep.
I want to bounce something off you, though. I need you to be able to block at a level that it's not a tell when you're on the field. You know, I thought at times with like Logan Thomas in the past, he had like a 70 catch season. He was never going to be a really good inline blocker. Former quarterback, just wasn't his game, right? Jordan Reed was this way to an extent where he's this unbelievable weapon. Guys on the planet can't do what he can do. It's him and nobody else. But like in line, it wasn't great. So I'd love to have both, have my cake and eat it too. But I do think you've got John Bates, who you pay $7 million to, who is one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. And I think Ben Sinnott proved this year he can block a little bit. I view him more as that like H-back who's like, you know, second, third tight end, can get out of the backfield, can make some catches, can block. Like, I'm not overly concerned. Again, you've got to do it at a requisite level that it's not a tell. You can't just be a receiver. But I want more of a weapon. I want a vertical route running, pass catching weapon for Jaden Daniels. So think like, I wouldn't sign Kyle Pitts at the money it's going to take in free agency, for the record. We'll talk more about free agents coming up this offseason. But like a Kyle Pitts mold or like an Isaiah Likely mold from Baltimore who's a free agent. David Njoku's a free agent. Might be my favorite option because he can block and catch. But like guys who can push the ball vertically down the field. Is Endry's that guy? He feels a little bit more Bates and Sinnott to me. Is that wrong?
I think he's got a little bit more upside in the pass game. But yeah, I don't think you're looking at a guy who's, you know, Kyle Pitts is a different ball of wax in terms of his ability to separate and create, you know, kind of after the catch. So I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why you're talking about Sadiq and Stowers kind of in those top 50 picks is because those guys can do that. I mean, very clearly they can do that. And so that's why Andrews is maybe the third guy this year. And there's a couple other people like the tight end from Baylor, whose name escapes me at the moment. He's got a little bit of that to him, that kind of plus pass catching ability. Now he has some of the most absolutely ridiculous, like non-effort plays I've ever seen. So I'm really leery of a player that doesn't play well without the football. But, you know, even at the Shrine Bowl, at the East-West Shrine Bowl, like there's I don't even know how to say his name, Tredore, the tight end from Mississippi State. He's 6'4", he's 235. He looks like a converted wide receiver. He, I think he was at Georgia Tech. Gosh dang it, I forget where he was before. But basically, he's like a converted wideout and has some snap to him in the run game. Not great, but really can run routes at an extremely high level. And so he's a guy that is, because of how bad Mississippi State was this year, is not getting a lot of talk. But like he has that pass game upside that you're talking about, kind of in the same mold as like Jordan Reed, where he's like a big wideout that's converted to tight end. You have to develop him a little bit as a blocker. But in terms of pass game weapon, I think that's an interesting kind of piece there. And again, like this is what you're talking about, the East West Shrine game. Like he's a guy that wasn't overly productive, but you're just kind of going as a mover. He's very unique for the position, and he's going to require a little bit of development. But if you're talking, hey, man, we're going to draft a guy in the 5th round who has some special teams upside and can kind of fill this pass game element for you, like that's an interesting prospect, in my opinion.
Seydou Traore, who's got a basketball background as well, by the way. Arkansas State, Mississippi State, ended up catching 35 balls for about 370 yards, Mississippi State this year. Yeah, this is why I think like the names you're bringing up are top 50 type guys, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to play that game because right now, this moment, they literally only have one pick there, and it's at 7. But beyond that, they're going to have to find someone who can do some of these things down the board. That's going to be the challenge, possibly. The other good thing about the Shrine Bowl, and Logan will have detailed breakdowns after getting to watch multiple days of practice and scout the game and all the stuff he's going to be doing down there, is that the D-line crop that they brought in is apparently really, really good. I saw a good breakdown of some of the guys that are going to be out there, but essentially D tackles, defensive ends in this draft class is one of the deeper groups, and I guess that the Shrine Bowl crop is no different.
Yeah, and I think the thing with the Shrine, again, there's a little bit of a different element here with the Shrine Bowl is because you are looking at traits. Like I think at the Senior Bowl, you're getting a lot of guys with really, really fantastic production. But again, at the East-West Shrine Bowl, the dynamic is a little bit different. So if you're looking at let's just go through a couple names here, like Ethan Burke from Texas, he's like 6'6", he's probably 260, big old hoss, but maybe not the most explosive dude of all time, but has really long arms, great feel for using his hands. Really an interesting player in that regard. And then you go to guys like UCF. Malachi Lawrence is the edge there from UCF. He's 6'5", he's 250, and built like an edge rusher should be built. But again, the production is a little bit up and down. The effort's a little bit up and down, but he can stretch his legs standing up and has some good explosive twitch to his game. Would get you really excited about his long-term production. Wesley Williams, the guy from Duke, right? He's a little bit squattier build, 6'3", about 270, but physical, plays hard. Again, there's a little bit of lack of polish to his game, but I love when I see people like that because I say, oh man, he plays hard. He can probably do some stuff on teams. Patrick Payton from LSU is another example. He's 6'6", 250. Everyone probably remembers him from Florida State as a guy with some pass rush upside. But you look at these guys and you say, man, there's some pieces here that have some really tremendous ability to be productive at the NFL level, just given their traits, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not maybe the college production wasn't there, but the body type is what you're looking for in terms of some of this production.
Couple of names that I was jotting down to watch when these practices are on TV that are on the D-line. DeMonte Capehart out of Clemson, the big defensive lineman, and then Darrell Jackson, the D tackle out of Florida State, is considered one of the better players that's going to this event. Again, you're given some names that could be in the mid-rounds and targets for Washington. What about those guys that are some of the real big names in this event? I don't know if it's a fit because I don't know if you'll have the picks. I'm still hoping Washington ends up with a second rounder somehow, maybe an extra third rounder. But if we're talking about top 50, top 75 type names, if things go well this week, those guys are taking part in this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the big fella from Florida State, what's his name again, Grant?
Darrell Jackson.
Yeah, Darrell Jackson. He's an interesting guy to me, man, because he's 6'6", he's 340. He's a big old hoss, man, and he's big back, big legs. He plays like he's 6'6", and what I mean by that is he has a really hard time with his pad level. Like I watched the game Florida State versus Florida, and Slaughter, the center for Florida, is going to be a top probably 100 pick, I would say, and really got after his ass, like really made him look kind of like a guy that was out of his depth. And so one of the things when you're 6'6" and you're taking on double teams, you got to have to be able to sink into your ankles, sink into your hips, and so these taller defensive tackles.
Think about Javon Kinlaw. He has problems with this sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good comp. And so, like, he's a guy that at this event, like in the team drills specifically, like there's no doubt about his athleticism. There's no doubt about how he moves. To me, it's like, how do you do kind of the other stuff? And as we've been here in Washington, we've seen some very talented people play on the interior that have had a hard time with kind of the dark arts of playing defensive line, like hand placement, hip position, taking on a double team, getting to a knee. And that's something that for me is going to be a big question for him. Because again, the splash plays splash, but how do we do the other stuff at a high level? So really curious to see how he looks during this week of practice, not necessarily in the one-on-ones, because I think he'll look fine there. I'm really more curious to see how he looks, in the team against some of these offensive linemen that'll be down there.
Two wide receivers I'm interested in, and I'm kind of just jumping to the positions where Washington obviously has the most needs, so forgive me for hopping around. But Malik Benson, Oregon wide receiver. Now, by the way, this is such a sign of the times thing. I was looking up his resume and some of his numbers yesterday, and it's just so funny to me. 3 years in college for Malik Benson. Year 1 at Alabama, year 2 at Florida State, year 3 at Oregon.
Yeah.
So he's been at 3 programs in 3 conferences, but he's made really steady progression in usage and production. catches have gone from 13 to 25 to 43. He was like a 17-yard per catch guy, went for over 700 yards this year. Is kind of a sleeper name at the receiver position, but I think he could really help himself with a good week.
Oh, absolutely. And in some ways, I don't want him to have a good week because he's a guy that I think could actually – he's probably comes in drafted as a 3 vertical, like a vertical speed third guy in your offense that I think has the ability to develop into a really, really good 2. And I think like that's kind of what you're looking for at the Shrine Bowl. And so to me, I don't want him to play that well because I think his film at Oregon's excellent, right? He's 6'1", he's 195 pounds, he's got the body, he can run by people. I think he's actually better in and out of cuts than I initially thought the more games I watched of him. And he's relatively competitive in the run game. He's not a killer, but he's good enough. And so to me, he's a guy that I think you could get kind of in that right now anyway. And I think this is like the struggle here in that 5th, 6th round range. At least the way people are talking about him nationally, I think he's probably more talented than that. I think that'll change as we get closer to the process. But he was really interesting because I hadn't watched him until you texted me his name. So watching him, I was like, man, if we're looking for guys that have kind of starter upside, like this is a guy that I think definitely fits that bill. Very, very talented, very explosive. I think catches the ball well, can compete and adjust the ball well in the air. So in terms of like these down the list kind of receiver guys, he was a guy that really jumped out from a talent perspective.
And then I don't know if you got to watch either of these guys, but again, I heard one of the Eric Galco runs the event talking about a lot of the prospects and 2 guys he liked as like day 3 type picks where the question was like, who's your bill? Who's the guy this year, right fit, right landing spot that could end up really being a nice player. He highlighted LSU wide receiver Chris Hilton and then also the tweener linebacker safety at Texas Tech, which is one of the best defenses in America, Cole Wisniewski. As 2 guys that he thinks like in the right spot could be steals in the late rounds.
So Hilton, man, is maybe one of the more interesting players in the draft to me because like I've heard his name a couple different places, right? And when you look at him, like he's got 23 miles an hour banked. That's the fastest that any LSU receivers ever run down there, right? So he's explosive. Everyone thinks he's going to run a 4.2. He's like a state triple jump champion. Like he's an explosive dude, but he's like the 4th wide receiver at LSU. Like he doesn't play that much. And so when you're watching him, it's like, man, like he's kind of like this slot guy, but he doesn't really get a lot of reps. He doesn't play super hard. He doesn't get a lot of volume on the field. And so I think this week for him is going to be really interesting because everyone talks about how explosive, how dynamic, how, all of these things. But on the tape, it doesn't really show up. So maybe it's just usage down there at LSU. They had a pretty deep receiver group. They've got, I think, 4 guys going to this event, and 2 of them are kind of return specialists. One of them's kind of the stud wide receiver who may have transitioned to the Senior Bowl. We'll see when we get the final list for the Shrine Bowl, but he's really interesting to me. Like just because there's a lot of positive wind around him, but when you turn on the LSU tape, you don't really feel him. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks down here at the Shrine Bowl. Then you mentioned, what was the other guy's name? Was Wisniewski? How do you say his name?
Well, but before we move on, I want to give a little more color on Hilton.
Yeah.
So his times in the 40, are estimated that it's going to be, 4.2s, high 4.2s, low 4.3s to your point. We'll see how he runs. But like a 4.31 second time was reported that he ran kind of casually at a previous pro day when he wasn't running for himself necessarily.
Right.
So I'm just throwing that out there. Like he's going to be a burner. But to your point, he's never gotten to play much. He had 13 catches a couple of years ago. He had 10 catches this past year. So for his career in 38 games over 5 years, it's 41 catches. But I will say, this is maybe me being an old man and whatever, I kind of love that he stayed at LSU for 5 years, not playing a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the deal is. I'm heaping praise on him. I don't know if he didn't have options or whatever. But like, do you know how many guys just transfer to go play and just like go hop program to program to get the most time on the field? Like the fact that he just stayed in one program for his entire career, I kind of love, I'll be honest. But 6 foot, 178, color me intrigued. And I just think a guy, as you said, that this is an important week for him.
Yeah. And again, like obviously physically very gifted, but like my question is like, why aren't we playing more? If you are this athletic freak, and again, when you watch him play, it doesn't pop. So again, like a big week for him to see if maybe it's just a usage thing at LSU. And
then the defensive player that I had mentioned that had been thrown out there as like a bill for this year by the guy that runs the event, Eric Galco, on this interview he was doing with the Athletics football show was Cole Wisniewski, Texas Tech linebacker and safety, who is a tweener, but that used to be a pejorative, and now it seems like it's more of a compliment, depending on if you can find a role on a defense, linebacker, safety, kind of an athlete.
Yeah, so he's a guy that I think is a little bit miscast in the defense there at Texas Tech. They've got him playing like a too-high post player, but he's 6'4", he's 220, 225, he's big old hoss, right? So I think there's times where you see his limitations as a safety, right? Like he's kind of like not the best at adjusting to the football in the air. Like he doesn't cover as much ground as some of these top end safeties. So I think you want to get him in the box kind of near the line of scrimmage as much as possible. But then when he's down there, like, again, he's a safety. So his hand usage, his ability to take on blocks isn't super refined. But I do think like that would be an interesting thing to watch for him this week is like, how does he transition from kind of playing the post in the box or more near the line of scrimmage for some of these opportunities. And again, like that'll be a big week because that is a tough transition. So again, like, it's funny you mentioned this player from Texas Tech, like Eric Gentry from USC is another guy that I think kind of fits this tweener mold. Like he basically plays like the star position for USC. He's 6'6", he's 225. He looks like he's 200 pounds. Like he is incredibly skinny, but he covers a lot of ground. He's aggressive off the edge. He's aggressive in the box. He uses his hands well. Now, he's not a perfect prospect, but like, who was the guy that Seattle drafted last year in the second round, the safety? Eamon Worry. He's got a little bit of that to him. Now, he's not that same player, right? He's not that same player at all. Let me just make that very clear. But in this...
if he's Nick Eamon Worry, I'll take him at 7.
Yeah, right. But if you're looking for those types of tweener builds... This guy, Eric Gentry's done it a little bit more. He's been in the box more. He's blitzed more. He's played a true edge, kind of stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker more. And again, he's got some more splash plays to him. So again, like this is the land of tweeners. This is the land of roles. This is the land of what we think you can do. And so those are another name I just wanted to throw into the mix there for people to be aware of.
75 tackles, 7 TFLs, 3 sacks. Started at Arizona State, ended up at USC, as you mentioned. 6'6", 200 is what he's listed, which... Yeah,
he's beanpole thin, man. He's beanpole thin. But again, like you see his length, and like the other thing about him that I think is interesting is like watching him drop into space for a guy who's 6'6", like his ability to just erase throwing lanes is really interesting. So for a team in Washington that's looking for a nickel, right, he feels like a guy that could be that kind of nickel linebacker for you if you wanted to. Because again, he's played in the mud, but he's also played in space, and finding guys like that can be really challenging.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen take command. So again, the Shrine Bowl, they're playing the game on Tuesday. Logan's flying out there today. He'll watch a bunch of practices, and we'll have detailed analysis of guys that stand out and impress him. Pretty cool access. I told you we're going to cover the draft better than anybody here on Take Command from a commander's perspective. So those are some of the position groups, interesting names to monitor that they could be keeping close eyes on at an event where there's 27 GMs flying down to Frisco this weekend. All right, Logan, next, let's take a look at the conference championship games on Take Command. Back on Take Command with Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Before we say goodbye, wanted to give some quick thoughts, maybe make some predictions on Conference Championship Sunday with the snow coming, by the way, all over the DMV. We're about to get pummeled. I know you don't fly back till after the weekend, so you should be okay. But it's looking like Sunday could be a wild ride here. Hopefully you bought some salt for the wife before you guys before you fly out and she tends to the house.
No, yeah, dude, I'm a little bit worried about return flights. I was just sick a couple days ago, so this whole thing, a lot of adversity around this trip, leaving and coming for the Shrine Bowl. So
we're gonna get hit. But it's funny. Last time we got a huge snowstorm was 2016 Conference Championship weekend on a Sunday, and that day the Patriots and Broncos played in the AFC Championship game. That was the last mega storm in DC. So here we are 10 years later, and we're back. The New England Patriots and the Denver Broncos while it's snowing in DC. The top 2 seeds in the AFC, chalky, make it through. Denver with a win. Bo Nix played really, really well, but breaks a bone. He's out. Jarrett Stidham gets the start for the Broncos against the New England Patriots. So, Logan, why don't we just start with what do you think the feeling is in that locker room? Like you get to the AFC title game, your goals are coming to fruition, and about 20 minutes after the game, you find out that the guy that just played his butt off, who's been really good for you down the stretch this year, is unable to play, and you're going to your backup quarterback in an AFC title game and, if necessary, Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure initially there's probably a lot of like, damn, like we're going to be in a tough spot here. And as much as you love the backup quarterback, like you understand that there's a difference between the backup and the starter. I will say though, like if I'm Sean Payton, like I probably trust Jared Stidham. Like I've made it work with him before in certain capacities. And I think, you're a defensive led football team. So like defense, like stand on your head, make us right. Let's play a one-score game. Let's play an ugly rock fight of a game like we've played all year and deleverage the quarterback as much as possible. So I think initially you're probably like, man, this is not good. But then I think as you get into the week, you probably start getting a little bit of confidence going. You start understanding what kind of team you are, and you still got a shot. You're to make it to the best game in football. So
how do you deleverage Stidham as best as possible? He has not thrown a pass since the final week of the 23 season.
Yeah, so I think for me, if I'm thinking about easy ways to do that, it's first I'm talking like if I'm Sean Payton, I go to the defense and be like, hey guys, like you have been one of the better groups this entire season. Like let's play like that. Let's really put the Rydell on and stick it to this New England offense. After that, though, I'm really thinking about running the football. They have not been super efficient running the football, Denver, but I'm really going to try and lead into that so we can set up play action shots. Like I think about when Washington played Denver, when Sean Payton was first there with Russell Wilson, I thought they did a great job of being really patient, running the football to set up these shots down the field, and they were able to hit a couple of them. And I think that's the type of game you want in this environment, right? You don't want to have a ton of third downs. You don't want to give them a lot of opportunities to throw picks. So Sean Payton, lean into what you do. We're going to throw a lot of screens. We're going to throw a lot of quick game. We're going to bide our time. And when I feel like the moment is right, I'm going to make the perfect call, which he does more often than not. We're going to hit explosive play down the field. And if you score 21 points in this game against that New England defense, you got a shot to win the football game if your defense plays well. So I think that's kind of the game flow you're looking at here in terms of deleveraging Stidham and kind of, again, giving yourself a shot to win this football game.
It's going to be tough, right? I know the Bills committed a lot of resources to stopping the run because they were such a terrible rush team defensively. But last week, the Broncos ran, and this is with Bo Nix's input, 70 yards, 3.18 per play, which is kind of, of all the teams that made the playoffs so far, dead last in a playoff game. But this year they were 15th as a running team, smack dab in the middle, 15th in yards per play. They actually did that at a higher level than, they threw the ball in terms of some of the per play statistics. So that's going to be important. What's we're robbed of is these two guys playing head to head to get to the Super Bowl who were drafted in 2024. And with Jaden Daniels 1 year ago in Washington having the unbelievable year in the great postseason, we've now got three second-year quarterbacks or quarterbacks since the 24 class to have made it to a conference championship game. And Caleb Williams was in the plus side of the 50-yard line in overtime, setting up for a field goal before DJ Moore, I thought, ran a lazy route and an interception led to the end of that ball game. It would have been 4 of the top 12 picks. 6 quarterbacks went in those 12 picks. 4 of those 6 would have already played in the conference title game 2 seasons later, which is amazing. I mean, this 2024 draft class is ridiculous. And obviously nobody had a better year than Drake May did of the New England Patriots. Hasn't been as clean or as easy for him in the playoffs. They've played 2 brutal defenses. The Chargers are really good. Jesse Minter's going to end up a head coach. The Broncos are a top 5 defense. The Texans, rather, were the number 1 defense in the NFL. They're the best in the playoffs. And now you got to deal with Denver. So he's got this murderer's row of defenses he's playing. But at the same time, he's got to stop fumbling. He's fumbled 6 times. But how about this, man? May should have been Nix. Jaden Daniels, almost Caleb Williams. This 24 class is showing out.
I mean, it really was it spoils you because, like, when you're doing draft evaluation, you're watching all these guys, you're like, oh, and the people are talking about that being a generational class. And I think even this is the year you kind of see how dynamic that group has been, and they are super talented. And I think the one thing, obviously Drake May's the exception to this, and Caleb a little bit as well, but like, the longer these quarterbacks are staying in college, the quicker the turnaround is for them at the NFL level. I think Bo Nix is maybe the poster child for that. Obviously, Jaden Daniels had a ton of starts in college. I think looking at those starts and the amount of experience those guys are able to get at the college level is just going to pay dividends down the road. So again, like, this is a lot of fun for the NFL. I think it's really good for the NFL that you're getting some young, dynamic quarterbacks in at this level that are carrying their teams to Super Bowls. I also think it's important to look at how rosters are constructed here, right? Like, Denver was kind of waiting for that quarterback to come along. They were able to get Bo Nix, who's able to kind of manage a really talented roster. How Chicago has changed their identity, with Ben Johnson as the coordinator there, a little bit run first, insulate him a little bit. And then obviously New England, year one of the worst rosters in football. And then now, after an offseason of spending, identifying key positions and key players, able to revolutionize that as well. So really, to me, it's a testament to the quarterbacks, the guys playing, but also how you build the team around those guys that I think is also a really interesting case study for those 4 teams you mentioned.
No doubt. Rams Seahawks NFC Championship game. Collision course. My favorite regular season game was like week 8 or 9, whatever it was, when these teams played for first place. This is going to be fun. Only a couple point spread, interestingly. I mean, Seattle has been a buzzsaw. I think they're kind of head and shoulders better than everybody else in the playoffs so far. But you throw that out because it's an arch rival in the division in LA, should be a blast.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think when you got a guy like Matt Stafford, who again didn't play his best football in the Chicago game, but I think can take over a game at any moment, is one of the maybe more talented players at the position, just in terms of arm talent and ability to make any throw you want. Sean McVay, the play caller that he is, understanding again the importance of running the football and how they've been able to run the football in critical moments, I think is also a thing that makes that offense extremely dangerous. But again, like you mentioned, Seattle, I go back to that game Washington had against Seattle, like probably one of the most dynamic, not probably the most dynamic defense in football. Like, that defensive line is incredible. They're kind of hybrid, Witherspoon, Eminwari, hybrid players at the middle level of that defense have been absolutely outstanding. And it's let that defensive McDonald be executed at the highest of levels. So I look at that and I say, man, that is just going to be, if you're a football fan, that's the one you want to see. And I really am curious to see if Sean can kind of find a solution here to that defense, because no one's really been able to. There have been times where, like, think about Kyle Shanahan, like one of the best offensive coordinators in football. Like you said this a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was kind of funny, like put in a locker a little bit, kind of bullied by McDonald, and that like never happens. And again, it just speaks to where that defense is at. And Sean, obviously, with the Rams offense is a little bit healthier, a little bit more talented. Can they put up a fight here? And I think it's something I'm really curious to check out.
I'm picking a rematch of Super Bowl 49, which was Patriots-Seahawks. That was when rookie Malcolm Butler picked off Russell Wilson at the goal line with seconds left to secure a win for the New England. Now, I don't think the result will be the same, but I'm going to say the Patriots find a way to overcome Stidham-led Denver, and that Seattle outlasts the Rams. I'm rooting for the Rams, but I just think the Seahawks, the one seed, are the better team. Plus, that's a tough place to go play. Yeah. We've seen the Seahawks last year with Philly, this year with Chicago. They kind of struggle in those elements. I don't think it's going to be snowing per se, but they look slower outdoors to me, and just kind of the offense doesn't function quite the same way as it does on carpet at SoFi. Any disagreements on picks there? Who do you got winning?
No, I think it's going to be a good game, the Seattle Rams game, but I would probably lean ever so slightly to Seattle. And as much as I think you can compensate for Stidham being the quarterback, the Patriots have looked really good. The defense specifically has played really, really good. And I think when you look at how well that group's played, like that's a tough ask, tough environment, tough ask for a guy who hasn't thrown a pass in 2 years to come into and execute at a high level. So I'm going to go Patriots, Seattle also. And again, I think it's kind of fun to be talking about the NFL playoffs at the moment like this, because it's so different than what it's historically been. There's no marquee quarterback. They're both young guys. I mean, shoot, Sam Darnold might win his first Super Bowl. Like, that's incredible. It's just a lot of fun, different storylines this year heading into the playoffs. Well said. All right, we'll be back when Logan's back from the Shrine Bowl early next week with a report on that. We'll get some takes on what goes on in Championship Sunday, and hopefully we'll have more coaching staff news to break down from the Commanders as well. Thanks for checking us out. For producer Evan and Logan, I'm Grant saying so long. This has been Take Command.